Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get these videos done for you guys. I just want to remind you on the 25th of September, I'm going to be out of town until the 30th. Okay, here we go. We're going to talk about investigating theft acts. My computer is going to tell me what's up. We're going to recognize various investigation methods that are used during a fraud investigation. All of this is very, very common sense. We just get to put some vocabulary words to it. Coordinate investigations effectively using a vulnerability chart, and we get to see that chart. Discuss theft investigation methods and how they are used to investigate suspected fraud. Nature of surveillance and covert operations. You know, this is when you hide out in some, the neighbor's bushes and get your binoculars out with your infrared goggles. Okay, maybe I'm being a little extreme, but it's still fun to think about. Okay, understand how invigilation can be used during a fraud investigation. That's the observation of people. Explain the process of obtaining physical evidence and its importance during a fraud investigation. Acquire knowledge and skill required to seize, analyze electronic information such as cell phones, hard drives, email, social networking sites, and more. So all kinds of fun stuff. So here they're talking about this McDonald's Monopoly game. And there's been so many different types of frauds that are out there. There's so many of them. I get notifications every single month telling me about different frauds that have been committed by different people and the scams that people come up with. This is a scam where McDonald's hired a certain administrative agency to handle this Monopoly game. And what happened was one of the executives in this business went and they took all the winning tickets and they gave them to somebody they knew, and they got a kickback. So kind of crazy, huh? So here we go. We got theft investigative methods. So we've got the triangle. You got surveillance, covert, invigilation. Again, that's where you're going in the observation of people, seizing and searching computers, physical evidence, conversion investigative methods. So these are different methods. Searching public records, online resources, net worth method, inquiry, interviews and interrogation, honesty testing, concealment investigative methods, document examination, audits, electronic searches, physical assets counts. So first things first, something happens where you feel like your business, your organization may have been compromised. It could be somebody calling in on a whistleblower hotline. It could be just a general feeling that this just doesn't feel right. It could be somebody coming to you saying, hey, I think such and such is going on. Something has happened. It doesn't feel right. You're concerned. Now you're going to want to know what's going on with it. Now you're going to have to also look to see if this suspicion is valid. And so you're going to have to kind of investigate a little bit. And then you got to think about if it's valid, if it's, is it unsubstantiated? Can you not prove anything? You got to take all these into considerations because time is money. You can spend a lot of time on it to try to find a fraud that may or may not be there. Or if you don't do anything, you could lose even more money by the fraud being continuously perpetrated, and you lose more and more money. So you got to look at that. And you got to think, okay, you got to weigh all these factors to decide, is it worth investigating and should we spend money on it? And so that's what they're talking about here. And they're talking about this right here. The signal that investigation or lack thereof sends a message to the others inside and outside of the organization. Very, very true. Whenever I hear about something going on, you always hear that there's probably going to be a drop in the stock, because people don't like that type of when you find out that you don't have everything under control in your business. So it's just, there's all kinds of different factors that you got to take into consideration. But when worse comes to worse, I'm going to tell you, I would investigate as long as there is substantial information that looks like, there's two types of there's civil and there's criminal law. Civil is the preponderance of evidence, and criminal is beyond a reasonable doubt. If you are showing a preponderance of evidence, it looks like it's more likely to be something has been committed. And with a little bit of investigation, you're able to substantiate that or not. I'm going to go ahead and investigate it. I'm probably going to even lower that preponderance down a little bit, and I'm going to investigate, if there's just some inkling, I'm going to look at it. If I have a stronger feeling, I'm going to dig a little deeper. I'm going to go check things out because I don't want to lose money. I like money. I like my businesses to have money. So I'm going to go double check things. But if you don't do anything, or if you find out there is fraud and you just terminate the person and not punish them, they're going to go on to commit more frauds on additional companies. So, that's always an aspect you got to think about. I always think you should go ahead and pursue some type of legal ramification, whether it's civil or criminal, so that it's on their record, so that future employers can at least have a heads up. Okay, so we are the head of a fraud investigation. Okay, so you receive an anonymous tip of an ongoing embezzlement scam from the fraud hotline. Your budget's limited, so you're considering whether or not to investigate. How would your decision to investigate the fraud change if you knew that the perpetrator was a mid-level employee or a corporate officer, such as a CEO? Okay, mid-level employee, less likely to steal a whole lot of money. I think their median is around 154,000 or something like that before they're caught. Still, it causes damage. However, your corporate officer, you're going to have so much more damage than just losing money. You're going to have the damage to the company reputation. You're going to have the damage if it's a publicly traded corporation to the company stocks. It's going to be much more widespread, and the amount of money that can be lost is not going to be hundreds of thousands. It's going to be in the millions of dollars. So there we go. Once predication is established, investigate to answer the who, what, when, where, and why. Okay, who, why, how, and how much. And so you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to start doing some type of investigation. And we saw back there at the little fraud triangle, they identified 4 types of investigations. So you're going to have to start with that. And we're going to start looking at obtaining evidence to either support or deny these claims of fraud. Okay. So we had to look for the strongest type of evidence. Physical evidence is best for inventory. Uncovering concealment is best for payroll fraud. Indirect evidence is most effective for collusive and kickback fraud. Okay, and there's the reason as to why those are the best for those different types of frauds. And I'm just going to speak up for payroll. Payroll, when you commit that type of fraud, you're usually using some type of concealment to hide the fraud. Normally, you've got a ghost employee or you're skimming money off of somebody else's payroll. And so you're going to look for, because they're going to be concealing that through some method. And now you got to go find how are they concealing it? Physical evidence with inventory fraud, you're looking at inventory getting up and walking out the door. So I'm going to look for some paper evidence showing that people are writing off the inventory without proper justification, and they just say they threw it away instead of maybe trying to put it out for repairs or whatnot. The collusive and kickback fraud, that's when you make a deal with somebody that, let's say that you buy merchandise from a company A, and they're going to charge you $3 more per gadget, and you're going to split the difference between the guy over at company A and yourself. And so you're going to look for some indirect evidence. You're going to be looking at lifestyle changes. You're going to be talking to your employees around them to see what kind of happened. And we'll see that in just a second. Remain objective. Don't automatically assume they're innocent, and don't assume they are guilty. You've got to keep a professional skepticism there, okay? You need to be confidential. You don't want to give anybody a heads up that you're investigating them. If you do, they're going to conceal it, have a chance to conceal it even further. I knew this one case where, and this had nothing to do with fraud. It just was somebody who didn't do their job well, and they weren't doing their job, and they were just playing games. And meaning they were doing everything they could not to do their job and pretending they were. So, and they were in the executive management team. So anyhow, so the boss was getting ready to let the lady go, but she had developed a strong friendship with another male colleague who was in the same level of management. And that male colleague was told that they were getting ready to let her go. Well, that male colleague told her. Do you know how much damage she did to the company? She went in, changed passwords, and pretty much the software they were using, she basically disabled the entire software, and they had to start from zero. It was bad. And anyhow, 2 people were terminated that day, not just one. Okay. So avoid arousing suspicion. Use words like audit and inquiry. Start with circumstantial evidence and work towards information gathering. So kind of, just kind of start looking, and, you could say, hey, we're just doing some audit work. We just got to double check something. Just making sure that we do our due diligence and show Sir Bonds Oxley, our external auditors, that we're always reviewing the data and making sure everything's on the up and up. Surveillance, interviews, evidence and people disappear. Very, very true. Very, very true. I've seen people disappear into the night, and you'd be surprised they can, even with how plugged in we all are. People can still disappear, and you can't find them. Okay, so here they're showing the investigative pattern. The last thing you're going to do is interview the suspect. First thing you're going to do is check the personnel records. You're going to start looking at data, okay? And then as you get in there, you're going to start talking to people outside of the company. And you're going to start talking to people inside of the company. The last thing you're going to be doing is interviewing your suspect. I think my phone just went wackadoodle. I'm out on the campus, and I think my phone went wackadoodle. I think one of my things crashed. That's okay. We'll find out in a minute. Nope, it didn't crash. Okay, good. Okay, so here we go. We are supposed to go in through here, and we've got purchasing employee. We think something's they're taking kickbacks. What should be which of the following should be performed first? And see, this was my, when I first looked at this chapter, I was like, and I started getting all excited because I wanted to do all of it. But they're asking about which ones should be done first. And that's going to be down here, because first we got to figure out, is there something to even look at? So we're going to come down here and do a special audit of the purchasing functions and look at some of the trends and changes. And we can create databases and different pieces of information that's going to help us with that, tracking a trend. Then we'll come back in, and we could be interviewing former buyers and unsuccessful buyers. Perform surveillance. I'd be doing that. I'm probably doing that second. Interviewing former buyers, unsuccessful buyers, and then lastly, B, interviewing the person who's getting the kickback and the person who's providing the kickback. Okay. Okay, developing a vulnerability chart. I love this. I think this is the coolest thing ever. I just think this is so cool. So this is something, like if you guys go into fraud, this is something you're going to be wanting to do. And this is going to help you identify whether or not there's a true issue, because you're not going to, it's not just a feeling now. Now you're writing down qualitative data, and some of it's quantitative data that is going to help you assess whether or not there's truly a problem. Activities that directly investigate the fraud: surveillance, covert invigilation, obtaining physical evidence, gathering electronic computer evidence. Theft investigations rely on the physical senses. 3 main types of surveillance: stationary, a fixed point, moving or tailing, and electronic surveillance. I'll tell you a secret. I don't share this with many of my classes, but my dad served 3 tours in Vietnam. He retired from the Navy. His biggest dream for me is he wanted me to learn how to speak Russian so I can become a Russian spy. Yep. He wanted me to go and join like the CIA or something and become a Russian spy. And so you got to remember, this is back in the 80s. We were still going through with the Cold War and all that kind of neat stuff. So, always in the back of my head, I do find, like James Bond and Mission Impossible. I think those are all fascinating. And, we can sit there and think about some of the surveillance they do, even though I think this might be a little over the top for this type of investigation. I do watch and listen to somebody on Instagram, and I think her name is Freedom Barbie, and she's mainly selling makeup and whatnot. But one of the things she does is she talks about some of her cases and the stories behind her cases. She's a private investigator, and she's got some really interesting points about people committing fraud. Most of it is workers' comp fraud or some type of fraud like that. Somebody's trying to hide their assets. Anyhow, could be fun. Most fraud investigations involve some form of surveillance, because you've got to. If I'm going to be looking at somebody, I'm going to be watching all of their movement on the accounting program. I'm going to be watching where they're entering at. Are they going into accounts receivable subsidiary, accounts payable? Are they making journal entries? Are they going back and forth into the cash receipts? I'm going to be looking for that type of data. Simple fixed point observation. Step 1, locate the scene to be observed and action likely to occur at the scene. Step 2, keep detailed notes, date, time, name of who is observing, who's witnessing, position from the observation was made, time log of all movements and activities of the suspect. That sounds like you're going to get caught no matter what. More risky and costly. Okay, mobile observation and telling. I guess we could follow them in a car or something. I always love the when I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was when Sheldon and Amy were getting married. This is on The Big Bang Theory, and they were all supposed to meet at a restaurant. And Raj and Howard and Bernadette were in a car, and Howard was just contacted by the government. I think it was the army, and he got himself all paranoid, and he thought somebody was following him, but it ended up being Penny and Leonard that were trying to follow them to the restaurant. And anyhow, they got themselves into trouble because they went down a one-way street with their lights off, and they got pulled over by a cop. It's kind of funny. Anyhow, so you got to be careful, okay? Advantages: you can identify the receiver of the stolen goods, identify the payer of bribers and kickbacks. I think that one's going to be very hard because, it's not as easy as as movies make it look. Electronic video camera. wiretaping. However, you do have some limitations because of employee privacy laws. Data on corporate computers and cloud sites are company property and usable for fraud investigations. Here's another thing that I kind of get, everybody knows that I listen to Reddit and stuff like that. I find it interesting. And I hear every once in a while about somebody who was wronged by the company. And when they're getting ready to leave, they take everything that they created at the company and they disable it or they sabotage it in some way. You can't do that. If you created some type of system to help with the administration functions of the company, whatever it may be, if it was done on company time, it belongs to the company. So you can't sabotage the data. Anyhow, so I always think, whenever I hear that, I'm thinking you could be, they could take you to court. A legal counsel should be consulted prior to proceeding with any electronic surveillance methods. We do have a reasonable expectation of privacy. So right now, I do not expect, I'm sitting in my office because my dogs like to bark and I can't make videos at home. So I'm sitting in my office and I have a reasonable expectation to assume there are no video cameras in my office videotaping me while I work. I do have an expectation of privacy. Prerequisite, I can't even talk. Prerequisites for undercover investigation, large scale. Other methods are probably going to fail, can be closely monitored. Significant reason to believe that fraud is occurring. Investigation is in strict compliance with the organization's laws and ethics. The investigation can remain secretive. Partnership with law enforcement has been obtained. Database searches. I go onto the databases all the time. I go on the databases and I look up public access to court information. It sounds really awful, but anything can be found on the internet because I've done it. My daughter was dating a young man. Well, she was dating someone. And I got her to tell me the name of the young man. Before I was done with the phone call to my daughter, I had found him on the internet, found out a ton of information, and I went on Zillow or Google Maps, and I went and looked at his home. So anything can be found. And I was researching because I'm a protective mom, and I was looking to make sure that he was on the character on the up and up. So I didn't find anything except for his home. But you can find out a whole lot of stuff. And if you have the ability to go into certain databases, you can find out financial information about people as well. So here they're talking about Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, uses track to oversee professions testing, training, and licensing. You can go in and run their credit. I'm going to be looking to see if they're going and buying things outside of their wages. I'm going to be looking for all of that. They're living outside of their means. I'm going to be looking to see, had a case. This was awful. Some place that I worked at hired a finance director. And she had a CPA. Now, okay, now I'm going to tell you guys a secret that not many people know. Back in the days, your grandmothers, you could get a CPA license without having a degree. Okay. This was way back at the very beginning. So all you had to do was test and enter, and you got your CPA license. Then when I was going for my Bachelor of Science, I can't remember when I got my Bachelor of Science, but I know it was in my early 2000s. You could sit for the CPA license with only a bachelor's degree. I was still within that threshold where I could sit and obtain my CPA license without having 180 credit hours. So, or maybe it's 150 credit hours. So theoretically, all you needed was people my age, all we needed was our bachelor's degree. Okay. So this woman comes and she comes to work at a company that I was working at, and she seemed really nice. And we did some really nice things to welcome her because we wanted to have a really good relationship and we were excited and we were hoping this was going to be a good match. It wasn't. I have never been in a novella until then. And it was crazy. She literally was going around behind everybody's back and saying they were doing things to the other person that nobody was doing. Nobody was doing any of this. We were doing our work, was what we were doing. And eventually it all came to light. And one of them was against me, and it turned out she had gone to this one lady and said I'd been doing all this stuff. And finally somebody brought the two of us together, the other young lady and myself, and she's like, well, you're doing this. I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about. I didn't know any of this was going on. And she's like, what, you didn't do this? I'm like, no, I didn't do this. I went over to so and so because I had to drop off paperwork. And anyhow, so we started talking, and then come to find out, we started doing research about this lady. Guess who had their CPA license suspended for 2 years because of bad behavior? Because they were doing the same kind of stuff in another state that they were doing in our state. Well, anyhow, she was terminated shortly thereafter. But she was wackadoodle. That's all I got to say about that. Anyhow, so things can happen. So you need to double check these things. I can turn around and make it look like I've got a license, and I can hide it, and I can make all kinds of documents that would make you believe it. That doesn't mean it's true. Double check. Okay, here we go. Theft acts investigate technique that involves close supervision, so watching over people. Temporary controls during the examination period make fraud virtually impossible to commit. Establishes a fraud-free control period. Observe changes. So you're watching over them so that you can you're getting that control. So you got two types of populations. You got your testing and you got your control. You're establishing your control so you can set up your baseline, and then you're going to compare it to your testing to see what variances you can find and what outliers you can find based on that data. I know that's statistics talk, but that's what you're doing. Observe changes between control and non-control periods indicates that fraud may be occurring. Okay, so detailed records are maintained before. Okay, here we go. Detailed records are maintained. Detailed records are obtained. Okay. Owner of a small bakery suspects that one of their employees is embezzling funds from cash sales. For 3 months, the owner makes copies of all the bank statements and cash records. 4 months, 1 and 3, the owners make no changes in the business operation so that they can, during month 2, the owner works alongside their staff, making employee cash diversion impossible. Which of the following cash sale totals for months 1, 2 would indicate the fraud? So month 1, 10, month 2 is 11, month 3 is 12. Okay, month 1, 5, 15, and then 5,200. Month 1 is 8,100, 79, and 8,000. This one looks pretty normal to me. That one looks like the normal one. This one I would question. This one I probably would question too. Okay. The sequence account does not indicate fraud because there is little change. Okay. This one looks like there is fraud, the one that I pointed out. This one does not indicate. I still think, okay, well, for me, $1,000 is still a lot. But this one here, that's a big time right there. Here's my control period. These are my variances, my testing period. Okay. Physical evidence. I'm going to track the data. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Broken locks, cutting marks, tire tracks, fingerprints. Yeah, you rarely see that. Indirect evidence of theft, vehicle rental to transport stolen goods, computer evidence of conversion. Fraud is rarely seen and has few physical symptoms. Physical evidence, other than, well, I was going to say me looking in the computer to check and see who's going into certain areas of the accounting software. But maybe they don't describe that. Maybe they're considering that more computer or electronic. Okay, is term computer forensics frequently used in modern fraud? Incorrectly gathered data is inadmissible in court. Evidence gathering processes vary from device to device. Cloud storage access frequently requires a subpoena or written permission from the perpetrator. Gathering of electronic evidence is a highly technical task and must be performed correctly. I know that I always hear about people saying, well, just go check your phone records. And then they start, you hear it on the cop movies about they have to go and subpoena. They got to go get the subpoena in order to get the data. So, we do have a reasonable expectation for privacy. So first thing, secure the device and perform initial task. Clone the device and calculate a CRC number. Search the device manually. Search the device using automated procedures. Now, there's all kinds of ways you can do this. And I was watching I was going to say it was like a 2-hour documentary kind of interview. And it was with this, I don't know who the person was. I just saw it and I thought it might be interesting to listen to. And they labeled this guy the most ethical hacker in the world. And basically what he does is he goes in and he hacks into these computers and he clones them. And the ones he's hacking into they're not the good guys, they're the bad guys. The ones that he was specifically targeting were child pornography, child trafficking sites. So he would hack into them, gather as much information as he possibly could, customers, who's on there, their IP addresses, all of that, and then he'd provide it to the authorities. Unfortunately, the cops couldn't use a lot of it because it was obtained illegally. So, step one, make sure you have the legal right to seize or access the hardware. Respect the chain of custody. Photo document the computer site and have neutral witnesses on scene. Obtain a snapshot of active memory before turning off the computer. Turn the computer off by cutting power and or removing batteries to ensure that no further modification is possible. Clone the device and calculate a CRC number. Clone the hard drive to a separate copy and calculate a checksum. Your checksum enables you to prove that your cloned hard drive matched the original with no modifications since hard drive seizure. I've had to take my computer because for some reason I get some stupid virus. I'm bad about it. And my computer starts, acting wonka. And so I take it to my computer guy, and my computer guy has to clone my hard drive so that he can go find the data and he can save my data that I want, all my files, and then put it back on when he fixes my computer. Anyhow, a CRC calculation verifies that your analysis was reported or performed on unmodified data. So that's pretty interesting. This is kind of stuff that I didn't really know about. Search the device file structure manually. Documents in the documents directory, graphics and pictures, movies, web, browser, trash, recent downloads, chat logs, and email caches. Manual searches allow for use of human intuition. I always think it's really funny when I hear about stories of people thinking that they deleted their cheaters text messages. And then the spouse figures out how to get around everything and they go find them and they restore them. I don't know. I think it's funny. Anyhow, search the device using automated procedures. Okay, following manual file search. So they're talking, this is all very specific. There are forensic software packages. So you can go in there and you can just open something that up and let it run and it'll get the data for you. Okay. Open source software may not be as user-friendly as commercial packages, and it might not be as good, okay? Because it's free. Electronic communications, such as emails, text messages, and social media posts are rich sources of fraud evidence. You will probably have to get search warrants or subpoenas in order to access some of this data. You know, you can find a whole lot out on Facebook. I have been very, very conservative when it comes to posting anything on Facebook and Instagram. I may post a picture of me and my grandbabies, but you will rarely find me post any political content unless I think it's absolutely hilarious. Then I'll post it. But I try to keep out of the drama. You won't hear me or you won't see me post anything about how I'm ticked off at my best friend because she ate the last cupcake and it was a chocolate one that I wanted. You won't hear me throw any of those shades to anybody. I don't do that because I don't want it's my business. I don't want anybody in my business. And so just kind of keep that in mind on social media. People sometimes overshare. And with that oversharing, there's a lot of information that can be found. Okay, here's a self-assessment. Suppose you're the owner of a small business with 2 employees. You notice that your profits are suspiciously small compared to your gross sales, and you suspect that one of your employees is embezzling. What would you actions would you take to start the investigation? Well, I'm going to go look at my cash. And I'm going to start analyzing my deposits, and I'm going to look at my sales and compare it to my deposits. I'm also going to start looking at, I would probably do a vertical analysis on all of my accounts to try to determine if, let's say that typically my accounts receivable is 10% of my total assets on average for the previous years. Now, all of a sudden it's 20%. I'm going to double check and see what's going on there. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking of. Another thing okay, so you're employed at a large firm, you are innocent of any wrongdoing, but have been behaving out of character due to a recent onset of medical problems. You become the subject of a fraud investigation on the basis of an anonymous tip. How would the discretion of the investigators affect your professional reputation? Well, they better be discreet because I've seen cases where people or the investigators go, all gung ho, and it affects the person's reputation. Then it turns out that it wasn't the person they thought it was. And now you've set yourself up for a lawsuit. So you got to be really careful. And what precautions would I take if I was a member of corporate fraud fighting team gathering evidence of inventory theft? Well, one, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing it legally. 2, I'm going to, well, I'm just going to start, I'm going to start come all the way back to the beginning. If it was me in my wonderful accounting world and I'm setting everything up, I'm going to have certain GL accounts that are my proofs, like my inventory loss. So I know that the book tells us that we post it to cost of goods sold. No, I don't. I'm going to have an inventory loss expense account or an inventory shrinkage expense. I don't care. I'm going to have one and I'm going to be watching that. I'm going to see who is the one who's writing off the inventory and is somebody double checking it? Does it happen on certain days of the week? I'm going to be looking at that stuff. Same thing with my cash deposits. If I'm having my register come up short all the time, and I've had it happen where I can pinpoint it's one person specifically, and I'm going to be watching that. So I'm going to start off there. But if I was actually on the side of, well, now it's time for me to go and investigate, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing everything legally and according to the policies and procedures of the company so that nothing can come back if we discover something. It can't come back where somebody can throw it out of court because we didn't do it appropriately. And there we go. There's a summary. And now I am done. We'll see you in chapter 8.